geeks, dweebs, nerds, and other unfortunates have been fervently waiting for has finally arrived. It's time for TMI, Confessionals of the Nerd Kind. And now, your hosts, Jeff Nerf Herder Chandler, Jim Kaiju Baker, and Christina Yojimbo Henry. You can continue. And now, let's get on with the show. Here is TMI.
And the red light is on.
That means they're stuck with us now.
Are we starting already?
We're skipping all the pleasantries this week.
Yeah.
We're getting right into it.
I think we're so excited to talk about Hamilton.
Or Xanadu, to be honest with you.
There's probably people listening just to hear us talk about either one, because Xanadu has its followers.
Well, I will tell you, Hamilton is just all over my social media feed. I mean, that's all anybody's talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Since
so
it's been
it is a shared experience to a certain degree, because there ain't much else going on out there.
Yeah, and that's also, what Lin-Manuel Miranda wanted when he decided to, have it filmed so that it could be released, so that people who cannot afford a Broadway show still have the experience of Hamilton.
2016 it was filmed during its initial run. So imagine though sitting on this and knowing you've got, because the show has gone on after the original actors have left. So it's continued to play with different actors. But imagine having the original cast and having it filmed and knowing that you had it. It'd be like money burning a hole in your pocket.
Right, because I don't think it was set for release until like 2021. It wasn't supposed to come out until next year.
Not for another year.
That's
more than a year.
5 years. That's 5 years that you're sitting on this thing. You're right.
Yeah.
So anyways, we can get into it. I'll tell you right now, news is a little scarce this week, I think, with the holidays and whatever. But we do have one news item, which comes from one of us. Someone in this room has reached the promised land.
Yeah.
We've climbed Mount Ararat.
The empty box has once again turned into a music box.
That's right.
So rumor has it, Christina, that you had butt in seat in a real life theater.
I did. I have to tell you, before I talk about the film itself for a minute, I felt amazingly safe in the movie theater. And I know this is
hazmat suit?
No, but the music box, so I think I mentioned before, they have two theaters. Like one is very small, one is their main theater. And their main theater seats normally 750 people.
That's a big theater.
Yeah, it's a big room. And it has high ceilings, like it's very well ventilated. But for right now, they're only allowing 50 people per show. So it's less than like a fifth of the normal amount of people that would go in that room. And they have every other row is blocked off. Like as a short person, I was like, this is the greatest movie experience of all time. Like you had to have at least 4 seats between your party and another party. So there's 3 aisles, and each, this amount of seats in each aisle, there's 10 across. So there's 3 of us. So there's nobody in the row with us because we sat in the middle.
And there's nobody in front of you or behind you.
Yes.
So you can never get that one person in an empty theater that comes and sits right by you instead of that.
We're looking at you,
awesome.
Pee Wee Herman.
That should be done all the time.
So, and then they asked, that you wear your mask if you weren't eating or drinking, and just sort of not like I was peering at all my fellow people in the audience, but just anecdotally kind of looking around.
Everyone else was as well.
It seemed like everybody was wearing their
being
mask.
Respectful.
Yeah.
Good.
So
as well as it should be.
So I have to say, I felt safer in that environment, I think, than I would have felt in a restaurant.
Well, the test is going to be at the Regals and the AMCs with the great unwashed masks.
Yeah.
You could take your mask off, obviously, to eat or drink. They still sold concessions.
So they did have concessions.
Yeah.
That's good.
So we had our movie popcorn.
Okay. Were they
so
gloved?
Jealous.
The people behind the desk? Do they have their gloves on?
They had gloves, and they don't even have a napkin dispenser. Like if you want napkins, they give the napkins to you in like a little tray so that you don't have to touch. Like
they need like one of those old school cigarette girls was walking around with like condiments.
So
in a hazmat suit.
In a hazmat suit, yes, because there's nothing sexier.
And then the usher came through before the show started when everyone was seated, and like he had a seat map and he was like checking off, and I asked him what he was doing, and he said they clean every seat that's been used, in between, and then at night they like
clean.
Right, and then at night they sort of defog. They use like an antimicrobial fogging thing. So we went to the first showing of the day, so I was like, I feel
you're
very
not
safe in this environment.
What time was it? At 11:30?
It was a 12 o'clock show.
12 o'clock. Okay.
I want to know how did you procure your tickets?
With 50 available, was it like a lottery or first come first serve?
Well, I would say that probably in a normal situation, it would be like really, frantic, because they do a big 35 millimeter festival every year, which was in the spring, actually, right before everything got shut down. And normally for those 35 millimeter festival shows, sometimes they show 70 millimeter prints of certain movies. The shows sell out, like they're packed to the rafters. So now the first movie after quarantine was 2001, which is what we saw yesterday. And it's the only movie they're showing right now. So they have multiple showings a day. So I don't think there's sort of the same franticness, because normally during the 35 millimeter festival, they'll have like one or two showings of a movie and people want to see certain things. So those things like really sell out quickly.
But what I'm getting at was you didn't order your tickets online.
I did. And honestly, like in a theater that big with only 50 people, there's plenty of room for everybody to have, if not their favorite spot, the closest to their favorite spot. But yeah, it's like such a great experience. It's 70 millimeter print of 2001, and if you've only ever seen it on the small screen,
which most of us, I do remember last year it was making the rounds, but nowhere near me.
I think I've only ever seen it on VHS. Actually,
there's no comparison. It's not.
I can imagine in 70 millimeter.
It's not just the size of the picture, although obviously that's part of it. There's something about not just seeing a movie the way the director intended, but hearing it the way they intend. So, because when you watch a movie at home, like if something's loud, you lower the volume or like you raise it, you're sort of like modulating things to your own preference. And so much of 2001, the experience of 2001 is the sounds that Kubrick uses to make you feel uneasy. And you can't escape from that in a theater.
That whole movie makes me feel uneasy. I've seen it numerous times. I'm like,
he's
what?
So
it's a draining experience for me. It's not one of my favorites.
No, it's so life-affirming and uplifting. I can't wait to watch it again. And it's just like slow and it's plotting and oh no, it's a homicidal robot that just has a big red eye. Poke his eye out. Just go, boink.
But I was thinking when I was watching it, I was like, what must MGM have thought when they got that print from Kubrick? They're like half an hour at it's supposedly a space odyssey, right?
Right, and it's
subtitle. Half an hour at the beginning is like chimps shouting at each other for like it's almost completely silent.
And it's not like he was an avant-garde filmmaker before this. He had made some very well-received movies, but they were traditional movies.
The moon landing, right?
No, not the moon landing.
Jim just get over. Oh my God. He's like, I'm not even going to acknowledge you.
Do not promote.
I didn't hear your comment.
Oh, I said like a moon landing? Is that one of his better-known films?
We could go there, but that would be an entirely different.
That would be, and that's not true, anyways.
But also, the movie has, because it's 2 hours and 45 minutes long. It has an intermission. Yeah. I said to my son, do you know why they used to have intermissions for movies this long? He was like, so people could get something to eat? I was like, no, they had to change the reel, because the reel is only so long. Of course, in this case, they absolutely had to change the reel because there was a projectionist up there.
Did you teach him the little hickey mark that shows up in the upper right-hand corner? So you know it's coming. I wish they had an intermission during Waterworld.
So we are taking tentative steps back into the movie theater is the point.
That's very exciting for Chicago. it doesn't look like New York's getting anything.
Yeah, I
real
was looking
soon,
on my
Jim.
Regal.
Yeah.
They've got nothing on the schedule.
No.
I think they had 25th anniversary of Babe slated for August something or other, but that was
Really?
the only thing that you could get.
That'll do, pig. That'll do.
Well, they're showing 75 millimeter print of Vertigo next week. So if you guys want to take a road trip,
wow, I would be so up for that.
You can come out. They did say they are planning on showing 170 millimeter print every week until Tenant finally comes out.
Music Box is a different animal than our local Regal.
Sure, because Music Box is an independent theater, and they have complete control over how they manage the cleanliness and people's safety and stuff like that.
Yeah, we see you in corporate.
So I got to ask, how many man ponytails can you count in the Music Box on any given show?
I don't count them. I'm not prejudiced.
I'd totally be counting.
Worst hair ever.
So is that all we have for news?
Yeah, I had absolutely nothing
news?
else. I was completely right in on Christina filling that gap, and she did.
Yeah, I don't think
thank you very much.
Thank you for going to the movies.
Yes, thank you. Well, listen, you got an experience. We got a story out of it.
Yeah, I could say that part of our news is our main feature today.
Yeah,
I figured that would be
which dropped on Disney Plus. We're able to talk about sort of new content.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And what I'm talking about is Hamilton, which is our main feature today, if we can call it a feature. It's kind of a unique situation. We've never covered a Broadway show before. And that's what this is. I wouldn't, even though it was going to be released theatrically, I would not categorize this as a film.
No. This is not where they're taking Best Little Whorehouse in Texas and adapting it to the screen. This is straight up a filming, which I think they filmed over 3 days.
Yeah, they filmed. I know they filmed more than one show.
Yeah,
and
it's like recording a live album. A lot of the times you're not getting. They're mixing and matching songs from various.
Right, because there's a lot of there's a lot of audience, point of view shots of the whole stage, and then you do get those close-up shots, which I think that they shot without, like, there's a mix where they did some of that coverage shot like after performances.
So I just like to say up front that I don't want to speak for Christina because she may have more experience, but Jeff and I are pretty much Broadway novices. So
yeah, we used to go
that
once
in mind
a year.
As we're talking.
We went once a year, the wife and I. This was
really? That's
3
more
children.
Than me, then.
The last but it wasn't like heavy fare, my wife was always into the Disney stuff, so it was Beauty and the Beast. The last show we went to was Anastasia,
right,
and I realized pretty quickly that I can never take my son to a theater again because he hated the experience. It was a waste of my money.
I've seen Phantom,
I saw
Christmas
Phantom.
Carol, and Spider-Man Turn Off the Dark. And that was and King Kong.
And King Kong,
basically it.
Yeah. I've seen many off Broadway.
Yeah.
Well,
So
back in the day,
Broadway.
we used to spend the weekend. Yeah, no, like we were in the basement of someone's house at one point, sitting on little bleachers watching this troupe reenact an episode of Brady Bunch. So but maybe you guys don't realize that I was a song and dance guy back in high school.
Were you?
Really?
Yes, I was.
You and Cab Calloway in vaudeville back in those days?
Yes, I actually from 6th grade on. I had the lead in Tom Sawyer in 6th grade, and I had the lead in my senior play.
The lead
as J. Pierpont Finch in How to Succeed in Business Without Really Trying.
I was the hare in my not that I have much of it anymore, but in The Tortoise and the Hare, I was the hare in my kindergarten production.
Nice.
I had to run around the length of the audience, and that was our racetrack, and I was so disappointed that I couldn't win.
You couldn't win. I was gonna say every night you.
I had to stop and wait for the tortoise to catch up with me and let her.
I was the lead in my 8th grade play. It was a musical. I had to sing. I cannot remember what it was called though. I was in Catholic school, and it was like a play about mission, like a comedy about missionaries.
Jesus Christ Superstar?
It was not Jesus Christ Superstar.
Book of Mormons?
It was not Book of Mormon.
So it wasn't hair. It was.
No. But I've always been, obviously living in Chicago, we get a lot of the Broadway shows here, like either as touring productions or as like semi-permanent productions. Like Hamilton was here for 3 years. Wicked was here for like 5 years. Book of Mormon was here, Jersey Boys, like everything kind of comes through here. But I've been just a huge fan of live theater in general. In high school, where I grew up in the village of Wappingers, the actual village. At the bottom of the hill from my house is the County Players Falls Theater.
Mm-hmm.
And they used to do a lot of shows, and I used to just sort of take myself to a show. I remember seeing A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Forum. I remember seeing Harvey, Arsenic and Old Lace, you know, a bunch of stuff. I used to like take myself to the Bardavon so I could see Shakespeare. I was just that kind of kid. I always loved live theater, and living in Chicago, I've been so spoiled. And we've raised our son taking him to live theater since he was really small, because I think it's important to like develop an appreciation for live theater and the kind of experience you get from live theater, which is that every night is different. You know, it's not like a movie where you watch it over and over, and every time you're going to get the same experience. You know, every night at live theater you could see the same show, you know, 3 nights in a row, and every time you're going to have a slightly different experience. So
because we used to go every year, we take the kids to Boscobel, which is an outdoor Shakespeare on the Hudson.
I've been there as well.
That was something that we took them early on. We went once a year, and we'd always go like family night. That was phenomenal. That troupe was just, you know, they were,
and that's a beautiful spot.
Oh, you go, we get sandwiches, you sit out on the bluff overlooking
you have a little
West
picnic,
Point.
You look at the trains going by on the river.
That was a great experience.
And now Jeff, you're closer to this than me, but I'm sure you've been to that Westchester dinner theater.
Sit down and eat. That's another
all the old ladies sit down and eat. Well, and watch,
that's my in-laws. They go once a year, and we always get them tickets. But that's a little cheesier.
Yes, it is. I've been there a few times. So maybe we're not as inexperienced.
That's right. You're not.
As I'd like to say. But we're talking about Hamilton today. Yeah. Now, neither Jeff nor I had really done a deep dive into the soundtrack, and
I'm very sad that it's taken this for me to embrace this album, because this is just like I said, I'm like singing this stupid songs all day.
You know, I think I mentioned to you guys that there was a period of time where like all of my son's friends were into Hamilton, you know, like just into the soundtrack, whether they'd seen the show or not.
Now, you said that you've got touring companies coming to Chicago, and it played in Chicago.
Yeah,
correct?
For 3 years.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So quite a lot of people we know were able to see it. We were not, because tickets were like $160 a seat, and they were so hard to get. Like every time they released a block of tickets, I would like log in and try to get a ticket. And it was like, nope, sorry, everything's sold out.
That's actually pretty cheap, because I think at the height of popularity in Broadway, they were about $1,000 a seat.
Yeah, I mean, this is a side conversation, but Ticketmaster is like really scummy now. They do this thing where they have verified resellers. So basically, you know, like scalpers come in and buy up blocks of tickets and then resell them through the Ticketmaster platform for, you know, like $300-$400.
So that's sporting events as well.
And it's like, it's so frustrating. It's like Ticketmaster, I don't think should be allowing you know, people to buy blocks of tickets and then resell
just to resell them.
No,
I agree.
Their thing, but that's another conversation. But
Ticketmaster.
So
Pearl Jam.
My son really had gotten into the soundtrack, and I listened to a couple of songs. I listened to Dear Theodosia and The Room Where It Happens. And then one day he's like, Mom, you just got to listen to it. I said, okay, I'll listen to it. So I like to walk and do my errands. This is relevant. So
stay with me.
Stay with me. I like to walk and do my errands. And I had a day where I was like, I have a bunch of things to do, you know, and I'll just put on the soundtrack and like listen to it while I'm out doing my stuff. You know, I'm walking around doing all my various things all around the neighborhood, and I'm like getting really into it. It got to It's Quiet Uptown. You know, this point in the show, which we'll talk about later, but
which is well into the You're almost all the way through.
Oh that's what I mean. Like I had a lot to do, so it was like I have a couple hours and I'll listen to the show. I got to It's Quiet Uptown, and I started crying. And when I say I started crying, I am like bawling hysterically, like where you cannot breathe, like
wrong with this lady,
you know, in the CVS, like trying not to let people see what I'm doing, like trying to pull it was winter, I was pulling my winter hat down. I cannot stop crying. I was completely like out of control, but I was so engaged in the story, even just listening to the music without seeing it. You know, so much is conveyed just in the music. it's such a powerful, powerful experience. So then I didn't really learn. I should have just gone home at that point, you know.
But he's like,
and
oh,
like,
no.
I was like, no, I'm just gonna finish my stuff. Okay, wipe my face off. I'm okay. And then, like, you know, I'm still out when I get to the end of the show, and Eliza starts singing, and then I'm crying all over again.
Right.
I'm like, geez. So then there was like a couple months where my son and I were just obsessed and, like, you know, singing the songs to each other and all this stuff. Finally, we said to my husband, like, you just have to listen to it, you know. It's like you
indoctrinate him.
Like, so you can be in our club.
There you go.
And so he's doing the same thing, you know. He's listening to it as he's going, like, back and forth on the train to work. So he comes home one day and he's got his earbuds in. And he's like, I just finished Hamilton. I said, how are you not crying? And he said, and he goes, I was being very stoic.
There you go.
Because he was on the train.
Sure. Yeah, you got
every once in a while you'll hear a deep.
So yeah, but it's a powerful.
It's powerful. It's an amazing accomplishment.
Yeah.
To make you so engrossed in what basically boils down to a history lesson, but it doesn't feel like you're being taught anything. It's like you're engrossed in the story, and the music, it just seems perfect along with the visuals. Yes, but as Christina is saying, you can listen to this and it's an amazing soundtrack on its own. The songs hold up. The melodies hold up, and there's a lot of information.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's just it. There's a lot of information being thrown at you, and it's like you have to have a little.
But it's so palatable. It's entirely palatable. It's very easy to listen to.
But that's so now I hope you guys understand my obsession with Leslie Odom Jr. now that you listen to this.
Because he anchors the show, you know, of the character of Aaron Burr. Mm-hmm. Is sort of a narrator, kind of your ticket into this world. Yeah.
And I love that conceit of Burr narrating Hamilton's story.
Right.
You know, it's such a great sort of storytelling conceit. I'm sure you've heard of the very famous soprano Maria Callas. So one of the things I remember reading about her several years ago is that a critic said about her, she was a great singer, not because she would sing loudly, but she had the courage to sing softly on stage. You know, she sort of made you come to her. And that's the quality that I get in Leslie Odom Jr. singing. Like, he makes you come in to him, you know, when he's singing. He will sing low, you know, he'll sing softly on the stage. And you sort of feel yourself coming to him, like coming to his voice. Whenever I hear him, I feel, it's weird. It's like I feel super safe. I know I'm in good hands. You know,
like a warm hug. So next time you start crying at CVS, maybe he'll be there.
But not just him. All of the actors were.
Oh yeah, they are
perfect. Yeah. And I couldn't imagine other actors taking their place.
See, that's the problem. Once that's like when we saw Wicked, we saw it with the original cast, and then when you see it, you know, and you can't help, especially if you have the soundtrack, you know, the voices, and
and like I was getting at before, seeing it first helped me listening to the soundtrack, because I didn't have to think, okay, who is this voice?
Right,
who
correct.
Is this voice? Who is this supposed to be? I could visualize it, like who was singing this on stage.
Well, what's interesting is that you have multiple actors playing multiple characters. They made them different enough, and you could differentiate. But again, there's a lot getting thrown at you right up front that you're just like, is
the actors that they use again later on, their characters are kind of connected in some way.
Yes, correct. Especially when you get Jefferson and Lafayette.
Right.
Daveed Diggs, I love him.
Daveed Diggs, I'm watching this and I'm like, he looks familiar, and I don't know why. And then I had to look him up later. He's on the show Snowpiercer. He's the main actor in that. I don't know if you've been watching.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
Anthony Ramos plays Lawrence, and then Philip a little bit later on.
Right.
And then there's that connection with the duel. Lawrence has a duel, and then of course Philip heartbreakingly has his own duel a little bit later on. Once you realize just how much thought has gone into this, it makes it seem more of an accomplishment than it already is.
Yeah, because like you said, it's a historical lesson being thrown at you, but it's presented in such a way that it's
in such an entertaining way.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, and I know that we'll get into it on the back end that there's some scholars out there that are decrying that there's certain
which I have no problem
that have been,
which I have completely no problem with dramatic license,
but
especially in a musical like this.
Right.
Well, that's the whole thing. Like, Lin-Manuel Miranda said, he was inspired by Ron Chernow's biography of Hamilton. He took certain license because you're trying to build a narrative. I mean, again, like this is something I actually have experience in. I wrote this book, The Mermaid, and P.T. Barnum is a character in it.
Right.
And I actually
so you're using real people in your fictional story.
Right. And I didn't feel any obligation to be precisely true to every single event in Barnum's life, because he is now a character in my story, and like the story comes first. The story comes before let's get everything exactly right. You're taking a certain amount of license, but my argument is always, the historical record is still out there. You can still, if you want to know exactly what happened and what Hamilton's life was like.
All you got to do is Google it, historical accuracy Hamilton. And
you can just go and read Ron Chernow's biography, And so like the facts are still there if you want it. That's not exactly what Miranda's trying to do with the story. He's not trying to, first of all, present everything that happened in Hamilton's life, because you can't.
You can't. I mean, this is only maybe like a 30-year window.
Right. And it's it's sort of like highlights.
Right.
Select highlights of Hamilton's life.
Right.
All of these charges of it's not historically accurate, getting leveled at Hamilton, for some strange reason, these don't get leveled at something like 1776 or Stephen Sondheim's Assassins. Gee, what could be different about the people who wrote those stories?
So let's get into that, because the casting of Hamilton, it's not a bunch of stodgy old white men playing these parts they were in reality. I wouldn't be interested in watching this if it was.
No. And this is the brilliance of it, which is you're casting because you found the best person for the role, not because he looks or feels like he fits that niche.
Right.
So I don't think it takes you out in any way, shape, or form that you have multiple ethnicities, presenting or representing these characters.
Yeah. And Lin-Manuel Miranda, in a famous quote, says that the casting of Hamilton reflects America now.
Right.
Right. And it's true. It does. It's very contemporary.
Right. And I think that there's something to be interrogated there, like people who've been traditionally left out of historical narratives, taking the story for themselves, and presenting it in a new light. This is, so I think something that's really overlooked by a lot of people, the significance of the casting. And it's not just, it's hip hop, so I'm going to cast people of color. This is a deliberate choice to try to bring history into the 21st century and make it accessible to everybody and make everybody part of that story.
We haven't mentioned King George III yet. By Jonathan Groff.
He was only on stage 3 times.
That's the song that sticks in your head. That's the earworm right there.
But I think it's a really interesting choice, because all these other songs are very, they're hip hoppy, they're very street, and yet the King is about as Broadway as you can be, as you can get.
And Jonathan Groff, who is probably, to a lot of people, besides Lin-Manuel Miranda himself, is the most recognizable actor, just from being in Glee and Mindhunter, if you've seen that on Netflix.
I didn't realize he's also Kristoff in
Frozen.
Yeah.
But his character is great, because, again, he only shows up 3 times. And the first time, he's the bad guy, right? We're talking about the revolution, and we're breaking free from.
He's spitting all over the place.
But that's just it. After his first appearance, whenever he shows up again, the audience just goes nuts, because now they know what to expect of him. Because he really just plays this so broad, and he's just so much fun to watch. And again, he's completely
and he needs
underused.
To be. He's the king.
Completely underused, but that's the brilliance of this character, which is he's just in there to be like, I don't know what you people are doing.
Yeah,
I love. He is one of my favorite lines. I will send a fully armed battalion to remind you of my love.
So it's like a toxic relationship. He's the worst boyfriend you can imagine.
Oh yeah, no, he's waiting for us to implode.
And You'll Be Back is probably, you know, one of my favorite, if not my favorite song, but it's very hard to say that with, you know, they're all vying for attention, all of these.
Yeah,
songs.
but that one, like you said, that is the earworm. That is the da 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 da.
Yeah.
How many notes can I get away with before we get a copyright infringement there going? But
right. But, you know, My Shot, the Schuyler Sisters, you know, The Greatest City in the World.
Oh, I like that. I'm Not Throwing Away My Shot, I think, is the overriding theme that goes through the whole play. Because if you play into the duel at the end,
right,
you know, it's so brilliant. Like, to the point where, like I said, I watched probably almost up to the first half Friday night. And then I went back and rewatched the whole thing Saturday morning. With a fresh, only because I also wanted to hear the songs again. But.
I mean, I think I've told you that we, like, our whole family, we get in the car, like, we turn the song, we all sing, like, this is
definitely
songs.
a road trip soundtrack.
And I have been saying for months that if this got released in the theater, that every showing would be like a sing-along, because more than half of the people would have listened to the soundtrack and know all the songs, and the 10 people who had never heard it would be like, what's going on?
Yeah, it's like your first experience with Rocky Horror. You're like, I don't know what's going on here.
But Wait for It is such a showstopper. And I think it's so incredibly generous of Lin-Manuel Miranda to give what I consider to be the best song of the show to Aaron Burr. You know, that's like a single. Wait for It. If you listen to it enough
Did
times.
They release anything in the charts from the soundtrack?
I know, you know, they had this the Hamilton mixtape. So I don't know if things were released from that, but I don't really follow like musical charts or anything.
Yeah, neither do I. So, but it seems like this could be picked clean, like an apple tree.
Yeah, right. Every week a new song's dropping. Yeah.
But I love Nonstop, which is
Nonstop is a good one.
Yeah.
Well, it's got to be that. You know, that closes the first act. So.
And one of the things I love about it is how so many musical elements from other songs at the first half come into Nonstop.
Yep.
So it's almost like every character is getting their say one last time before the intermission.
I like The Room Where It Happens, especially.
That's a great one. Again, like a showstopper.
And that's Burr trying to, you know, wanting to get in there. It's
such a great song because to me it so much embodies the way Burr is depicted in the play. You know, so many times Hamilton says to him, like, if you stand for nothing, what do you fall for? He still doesn't stand for anything. He just wants to be a part of the machinery, you know. Right. He wants to be in the room where it happens. That's what he wants. He doesn't want justice or want, you know, X, Y, or Z. He wants to be there. He wants to be part of the system. That scene where Hamilton chooses Jefferson over Burr in the presidential election, you know, when they're doing the electoral college votes. Yeah. And you see the look on Burr's face when Jefferson's picked. Now, of course, historically, you know what happened. Okay, so there were 35 votes in the electoral college, swaying back and forth because there was basically a tie between Burr and Jefferson for the presidency. At that time, if you lost the presidency, you became the vice president. You didn't have a running mate per se. You got stuck with this guy.
Like number two became number two.
Right. Yes, you got stuck with this guy who was, you know, essentially
probably insulting you for months beforehand.
Right.
It was forcing you to work together.
So that scene, if you read about the presidential election of that time, the electoral college played much larger in the final tally. And they went through several votes where it was still a deadlock. And finally, Hamilton said that he would prefer Jefferson over Burr, and then the tide turned and Jefferson ended up getting the presidency. But in that scene, you know what happened historically. You know that Burr became the vice president. Obviously, I'd listened to the soundtrack many times. I knew what happened in the show, but Leslie Odom Jr., the look on his face, the way his smile like sort of fades away when Hamilton doesn't choose him, I actually felt sick to my stomach. I felt so bad for him. It's ridiculous. That's how invested you can get in a show like this.
And then you're like, that's right, you shoot him.
I have this this book called Duel with the Devil, and it's about Hamilton and Burr when they were co-defending in the first murder trial in the U.S. And actually, it's referred to in Nonstop.
Yeah, that they were making history.
Yeah,
because this was the first murder trial of the nation.
In Duel with the Devil, there's a section at the end where Burr talks about the duel and what Hamilton did the day before the duel. This actually had a lot to do with how Burr was perceived by history. So Burr wrote, "The last hours of General H appear to have been devoted to malevolence and hypocrisy." And it turned out that Hamilton had, the day before the duel, wrote this very lengthy farewell note talking about the circumstances of the duel and indicating that he disapproved of duels and he intended to throw away his first fire. So the fact that Hamilton had written this note saying that he intended not to, really participate, he was just going to fulfill Burr's sense of honor. And he said, "I have thoughts of even reserving my second fire and thus giving a double opportunity for Colonel Burr to pause and reflect."
Yeah, that didn't happen.
So, but
Noble.
like,
so he literally did throw away his shot.
He did throw away his shot, and he wrote this note saying he intended to throw away his shot. And when this became public, Burr looked like a cold-blooded murderer.
Yeah, no, that doesn't sit well. It's like, dude. And but he almost got the impression that, like, he immediately regretted it. I don't think that he really was looking to kill this guy. I mean, they had that adversarial relationship, and then at one point, the dialogue he even says, "My first friend, my enemy." He's the first guy he meets. And they were basically the same sides.
And in Burr's, when you're introduced to Burr, right up front, he says, "I shot him." So even if you're not familiar with this story, you're looking at this relationship to see where it's going and how
it deteriorates. Point. Yeah, I do want one of those dueling cloaks, though. I could rock that.
But the duel already is such an extreme situation to be in. It's a life or death situation. So you're not actually.
Unless you're like Highlander.
Your mind is not thinking, okay, I am going to shoot him before he shoots me.
It is pretty barbaric. So talk about that duel for a minute, which is go into this. The stage production on this is so minimalistic, and it's brilliant because you're now like you can't take your eyes off the actors. Because there really is nothing else going on. You got little props. Maybe you have a little desk.
And the stage is rotating.
The rotating stage, which is, I mean, that scene where Philip gets shot, and or is it when after Hamilton gets shot, and the two guys are on either side of him rowing him back, like they're just pantomiming rowing, but they're obviously rotating. There's scenes where Hamilton's at his desk, and you got the wife and the kid playing the piano, and they kind of crisscross each other. It is so simplistic in its execution, but it's very powerful.
The whole thing is that way because there's no real set to speak of. It's always the same backdrop.
Maybe a ladder they rotate around, or you, like you said, you get a table, or you get a desk, but that's about the extent of it. There's really no other props per se.
But I like too how that minimalism, like you said, really brings the focus to the actors. I love the staging of the cabinet battles as the rap battle, where Washington comes out and is like, "Let me introduce." We
didn't even talk about Washington because he was one of my favorite characters. I absolutely loved. And there's one scene where he's with Hamilton, and he just towers over him. And he doesn't.
What's interesting about him is that they workshopped this at Vassar in Poughkeepsie.
Yep.
Really.
And a lot of the actors were different, except for a handful. And Christopher Jackson was one of them that was with Washington all to Broadway.
That was because he was in the Heights with Lin-Manuel Miranda.
His previous show.
For show. So that was why.
He's now going on to play Sebastian in the live action Little Mermaid.
Well, he'll be great.
Right.
Like, no doubt, he'll be great.
Right. Yeah, no, I absolutely loved his character. I thought he was fantastic.
They're all amazing. Satisfied is another one of my favorite songs. I think Renee Elise Goldsberry is phenomenal as Angelica. Everybody's great. You can't help it. you just are overwhelmed by the show. It just sucks you in.
Yeah. And as I mentioned, that Daveed Diggs, amazing. He's in Snowpiercer. Renee Elise Goldsberry, who played Angelica, as Christina was just saying, was in the house with a clock in its wall. So she's been on TMI before, and we didn't even realize it.
Oh, yes. Wow.
And Anthony Ramos in Godzilla King of the Monsters. Oh. So we got some genre people
there
in
we
here.
Go.
But yeah, amazing. I was just so taken by it.
It is riveting.
And yeah,
it
by
really
the end,
is.
especially when Eliza is talking about how she opened the orphanage, that's what got me.
Like, you're done then, right? Like, you're so emotionally. Like I said, I've listened to this so many times and I'm watching it again. I told my son beforehand, because he sometimes gets upset when I cry during movies. I'm a crier, like a serious crier. I was like, I'm going to cry many times. Like, just let me be. Like, just let me be. And
now,
at the end,
did you have a picture in your head, Christina, knowing the soundtrack and not knowing the visuals beforehand? Did you marry this to anything in your head before?
No, because I had seen some stills, and I had seen like right after the first time we listened to the soundtrack. Like, there's like 1 million YouTube videos out there. With different stuff about the show. So I actually had watched a lot of that stuff. So I had a fair idea of what to expect. I just wanted to see the whole thing in one seat.
Just to experience it. Without paying $1,000 for a seat.
One of the things that's great is I saw one of the YouTube videos I can't remember. It was a while ago, but Barack and Michelle Obama were talking about. I saw it. Well, they were talking about how Barack Obama was sort of taking credit for the existence of Hamilton in a funny way, in that sort of Barack Obama way, with his very dry humor, because he had initially invited Lin-Manuel Miranda to the White House for some kind of poetry.
It was like I did see his performance. I thought it was like 2009 or something like that.
It was quite a long time ago.
Wasn't he supposed to perform something from In the Heights at this?
And he came and he brought, basically it was Alexander Hamilton, the opening.
Yeah, the opening song. Yeah.
But
he sang everything. It wasn't
right. He just rapped it out.
Yep.
And that was sort of the genesis of the show. The Obamas love it because they've seen it literally from just when it was just Alexander Hamilton all the way up to it being in the show.
We never talked about the Say No to This, which is also a highlight, which details the affair.
I think it's one of the great things about the show is it's not just like, look, Alexander Hamilton was a great guy. It's like, it's like, look, he was super flawed.
He was human.
He made a ton of mistakes, and like, this isn't some thing where we're going to put him up on a pedestal and say, oh, he did everything right all the time. And it's one of the interesting things I think about him as a person is sort of the emotional courage to write the Reynolds pamphlet, like to put it out there.
Put it out there yourself before somebody else.
Yep.
Yeah, it's like one of the sort of fascinating things about his characters. One of the things that makes him interesting, I think, if you're a dramatist, like Lin-Manuel Miranda, to explore, to say, look at this guy who believes X and does Y. Look at this guy who's like full of contradictions. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's really interesting.
Unbelievable, the amount of work and how successfully he pulled this off. So he deserves all the credit and all the kudos and all the publicity that he got for this. And I cannot wait to see what he does next.
Yeah, he'll never live up to it.
I think everybody thinks that,
Yeah, no.
But, in this, there was universal acclaim when this came out, except for a few doubting Thomases. The New York Post, which Hamilton founded, panned his performance, said Miranda lacks the charisma and intensity of the man he portrays. I'm sorry, did you know Hamilton?
Right, yeah.
Seriously.
I had lunch with him the other day. I see him on my $10 bill all the time, which they were actually going to pull, right? Weren't they?
Right, well, they were talking about changing it
Harriet
Tubman, which is like, yay, Harriet Tubman, but like, let's take Andrew Jackson,
exactly. If you're going to get rid of one guy,
the 5, and put Harriet Tubman there instead of taking Hamilton, the founder of the National Treasury, but Like, let's not take him off the bill.
I know, right?
Did we think about buckets when we were watching Hamilton?
I didn't even write buckets. It's go see it, watch it.
I'd give it probably 4 1/4, 4 1/2, maybe around that area. I was very taken by it.
Yes, yeah. I will say the end. After Burr shoots him, and then he immediately kind of regrets it, and he has this line where he says, the world is wide enough for Hamilton and me. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, if that's the one thing anybody takes away from this, in this day and age, that's what we should all be embracing, which is, you know what? We all have differences. I may not always agree with you. You may not always agree with me, but it's a damn big world. Mm-hmm. We can all get along.
Yeah. And it's an embrace of the immigrant as well. I think that's one of the overriding themes of this.
Yeah, I mean, right out of the gate, the opening Hamilton song.
And although I can't hear, I love the line in the play when he says, "Immigrants, we get the job done." But I cannot think about it now without thinking about Don Johnson in Knives Out, like totally misquoting that line like to the nth degree.
That was a good movie too. Mm-hmm. They said like over 300 microphones were used in the recording of this. I mean, but you figure probably every actor has one,
I can't imagine actually being there live and watching this. That would be overwhelming.
No, I will say my wife's cousin, who is in the industry, he works as I'm going to butcher it now, and he's going to be mad at me because he's probably listening, but I believe that he is a director's assistant, and he does a lot of commercial work or whatever. And he had never seen this. He wasn't a big play guy. His girlfriend at the time dragged him to go see this, and he was like transformed. Like this just blew him away.
I would be an emotional mess. Actually, I would still love to see them do this as a theatrical release, because I'd love to see this big.
I think that's coming. I think they still will. That's
really?
This is like a cult kind of a showing. People would show up in droves, I think, if they showed it theatrically.
I'd love to see it on a big screen, like with movie theater sound, and just sort of kind of like get to wash in that experience. I think would be amazing.
I'm glad that they filmed it for posterity, that this document exists.
Yeah, because I mean, there's so many shows that, like Book of Mormons. I'm dying to go see that show. I'm not paying $700-800, and now all the original cast is gone.
Let me speaking of Book of Mormon and Hamilton, and let me take this opportunity now to plug, for those who have access to the Apple TV Plus, the cartoon Central Park, which is a musical cartoon starring Josh Gad from Book of Mormon, and Daveed Diggs and Leslie Odom Jr. Christopher Jackson guest starred on one episode. Actually, it has I keep saying it has about half the cast of Book of Mormon, like half the cast of Hamilton. And Frozen, because Kristen Bell's in it also. And it's a musical cartoon about a family trying who lives in Central Park. The father, Leslie Odom Jr.'s character, is the manager of Central Park, and a crazy rich lady played by Stanley Tucci is trying to build condos in Central Park, to get the public land, go up for sale. And it's a really great show. It's very, very funny. And if you love Hamilton, you'll love it. And if you love Book of Mormon, you'll love it. There was one episode where Andrew Rannells, who was Josh Gad's co-star in Book of Mormon, showed up to play a rival busker, because Josh Gad plays a busker on the show. And it's crazy. You can actually still feel their chemistry as cartoons. I think it's nuts, but they have a couple songs that they sing together. They're two of my favorite songs from the show. So I'm slightly obsessed right now with Central Park. It's great. If you guys have a chance to see it, please do, especially if you love Hamilton.
Oh, there you go. Right. That just feeds right into our confessional. Huh?
Christina, would you offer any buckets for Hamilton?
Yeah, I mean, I would say 4 3/4. There's very few things that I dislike about the show. I understand to a certain extent why certain choices are made. Again, the focus is on Hamilton himself as a person. You're trying to make, you know, a lot of times in theater, things sort of get treated very broadly, but like if there's anything I dislike about the show, it's that all the female characters in the show are in love with Hamilton. Like they don't have identities of their own. And you know how I really prefer to see strong female characters, like, you know, with agency. I mean, it's redeemed a little bit at the end.
When you find out
with Eliza's story. Yeah, if there's any quibble I have with this show, it's that.
So thank you for turning us on to this.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, you probably would have come across it.
I was going to say, I think I probably would have been.
You could have avoided it.
No, I would have been peer pressured into it.
But it wouldn't have been my first choice, you know, to cover for the show. Now it seems like it's a no-brainer. So
yeah, now you guys, like I said, now you guys are like obsessed too, and you'll be walking around singing the songs all day.
I already am.
And you know, memorizing all the lyrics. And
so if you see me crying at CVS, you'll know. Speaking of crying, what's our next movie?
So we're going to go to the concession stand, and we will be right back.
When it comes to candy, I'll bet every young man has a secret wish to own a candy store, filled to his heart's desire with smooth, rich chocolates, creamy nougats, and chewy caramels. Well, whatever your favorite is, you'll find the Refreshment Center's a heaven of delectable candy just waiting for you to take your pick. So treat yourself to some delicious candy from the Refreshment Center. There's time between shows. Stop in right now.
Yum, yum. It's a meal in itself. Our all-meat super dog. Enjoy one now.
Okay, we're back. We're going to the opposite end of the musical spectrum.
Hey, this is a much
Although
beloved. This
is
a much beloved.
This has a following.
Yes, it does.
I'm sure not as big, not anywhere near the following that Hamilton is experiencing right now.
Oh, there's Xanadu lovers out there.
There are Xanadu lovers.
It's a pretty strong soundtrack.
So let's talk about history with Xanadu. This came out in August of 1980. So probably the first opportunity that any of us would have had to have seen it would have been a year or two later when it started to make the rounds on cable TV. So do we have memories of seeing this as kids?
Yes, nope. I do. And that's probably the only reason why I would even look at it now. Because, you know, I loved it when I was like 7 or 8 years old. I was quite a big Olivia Newton-John fan.
She was coming off Grease.
Yeah. So, and I was...
What's not to like?
Just in love with her. And, you know, I bought this cassette tape and, you know, I listened to all the music over and over. I remember watching it multiple times. And when you're that age, like, you are not thinking about things like plot. Because this movie does not have a plot. I remember, you know, I loved seeing Olivia Newton-John sing, and I loved like the lasers.
Look,
and, like,
she's on roller skates.
The painting is coming alive.
Right, exactly. It was like, oh, there's a fantasy element, and then you know, I remember especially in my mind, it was actually a lot longer. The animated sequence.
Right. I know it breaks into like a Mary Poppins type sequence.
Yeah, which is that's Don Bluth, by the way.
Yeah, it is.
Who then turned around and basically stole that for Thumbelina, which came out in like '94.
I have to tell you, Christina, that my wife so enjoyed this viewing, so much more than I did. Immediately after the movie, she was on her phone downloading the soundtrack.
The soundtrack
you can't, until we hit Hamilton. These songs were in my head all week. Because I watched it last week as soon as we finished recording last week's episode. And I'm a huge ELO fan anyways.
And I'm always happy when I can pick something that Aaron wants to watch.
Right. But me, I don't think I ever saw this. I think, The Muses, whenever this came on HBO, light was streaking from me as I ran from the room.
Ka-chow! I
had no memory of this. And it's just, like you said, when you're younger, you know, I've seen a lot of bad movies and I've loved a lot of bad movies as a kid. But plot doesn't matter. And let me tell you, there is so little plot to this. It's Gene Kelly musical numbers strung with a movie strung around it. Basically.
Well, that's it's like music videos, little music videos.
Yeah,
you know, but that's because there's not really enough of a narrative to actually sustain a whole
which is interesting
movie.
because it was pre MTV. They're coming out in 1980, and at one point the kid even says, "Hey man, it's the 80s," and I'm like, barely,
yeah. When they were probably filming this, it probably wasn't even when they were actually filming.
No, and everything they're wearing is so 70s. It's like, yeah, the 80s, except for maybe the roller skates. But
to me, my memory of this was, and I think we talked about this when we did Candle Shoe. Like, my perception of Candle Shoe was Jodie Foster and an old lady. So similar to this, it was Olivia Newton-John and an old man. So that's, I never had any desire to watch it, apparently.
It was initially written, it was not supposed to be a musical. Olivia Newton-John was not supposed to be in it.
A complete cash-in. That's what it was.
It had like an actual script, and it was kind of taking advantage of like the roller skating craze, and that was part of the story. But the original screenwriter, his intention was really to sort of highlight kind of life around Venice Beach. He sort of wanted to, it was supposed to be a low budget thing. And then suddenly Olivia Newton-John was interested. She had just done Grease.
Wheels are in motion.
That's right. And and then
she was probably, it's not a small thing to say that she was one of, if not the biggest female stars in the world at that point due to Grease.
Right. And so that automatically sort of launched the budget into the stratosphere. It launched expectations into the stratosphere. The script was rewritten, and I put quotations around rewritten.
You mean the script was thrown out?
And Robert Greenwald was recruited to direct it, and he said that he was given a script that was 40 pages long. That's like nothing. It's like, that's not a script. Right. And he said he kept thinking that stuff was going to get added, and it never was. So he's literally working with like what amounts to an outline of a story, but he's got this big budget. He has Olivia Newton-John, and then somehow or other Gene Kelly gets involved, and
then it becomes even something else.
Right. And then so I have the DVD, the magical edition.
Yeah, that's the one that I got from Netflix.
So you watched the documentary?
I did.
The documentary. So on the documentary, they talk about how Gene Kelly said he would do it, but he didn't want to dance.
Which is...
Right. Then what's the point of having you, Gene?
It's like Sigourney Weaver saying, "I'll do aliens, but I'm not gonna hold a flamethrower." No, sorry.
So he went, and he hadn't decided to do the film yet, and he went and met with Kenny Ortega, who is the choreographer, and he said to Kenny, if I danced in this movie, how would you choreograph my dances?
That's your job, dude.
And Kenny said he had not been expecting that. So he said he sort of got up and started doing a few little things. And then Gene Kelly got up and started dancing with him. And then the two of them were like, for half an hour sort of dancing around doing stuff. And then Gene Kelly was like, "Okay, I like you." And then opened the door and told the director, "Okay, I'll do your movie."
And he'll dance, right? So he kind of passed the test.
Because I always think of Kenny Ortega. First, I always think of Dirty Dancing, because he was a choreographer for Dirty Dancing.
He's a very successful choreographer.
But I always remember him as directing the Tubes' "She's a Beauty" video, which is one of the creepiest, weirdest, craziest videos.
And that's the Tubes in that rock battle.
One of the most bizarre looking men I've ever seen. Fee Waybill, the lead singer of the Tubes.
But yes, it is the Tubes in the rock battle thing, because Kenny Ortega was their stage choreographer. That's how they got.
Why would they not just put ELO in there?
That was how they got involved, because he choreographed all of their stage shows.
Right. And it was interesting in that documentary how they say they've never performed the song from Xanadu. Ever.
Yeah.
Really?
And I was right last week. Michael Beck is the guy from the Warriors.
Yeah. It's been a long time since I've seen the Warriors. So.
And as soon as I saw him in this, I was like, that's the guy.
Andy Gibb reject. He looks so much like Andy Gibb. It's ridiculous.
My son was in the room when this was on. I'm not going to say he was watching it.
He was doing everything in his power to avoid it.
He was in the room. And so when it's over, he looks at me and he goes, so a guy gets blessed by an angel to build a roller rink? I was like,
hey, don't you pass judgment on a roller rink.
And I was like, that's the plot.
Yeah, basically.
Like, you got it.
Yeah. And I would so go to this club, by the way.
Part of the original script, because this didn't make the final cut, apparently, is that there was a connection between the painter character played by Michael Beck and the Muses, that he painted that mural.
That's what
I
think
completely missed.
It's so funny because I feel like as a kid, I assumed that. Is that strange?
That is weird because I just got just watching it, he stumbles across this thing.
Well, the weirdest thing is like he throws his torn up drawing out the window and it touches the painting and it comes to life because his litter has touched the painting.
Yeah, I don't know. He lost all credibility because he worked for this place, this record company, where his whole job was to replicate album covers to blow them up so apparently he's just a human Xerox machine. They didn't have the capabilities, it was like Tower Records back in the day, you would see like these big hand-painted depictions of album covers, but I'm like, this guy is freaking boo-hoo and crying because he's being paid as a commercial illustrator to be creative, and I'm like, stop your crying.
And it's like a Laverne and Shirley type assembly line where that's what they try to play it as, that all these downtrodden painters are being tasked and whipped by this overlord to make album
replicate these album covers.
The one thing, just to give a little bit of credit, the effect of the Muses coming out of the wall, I think, is pretty well done for 1980. Yeah. When they're sort of like coming to life, like it's actually hard to predict which one's going to start moving first. Like it's animated pretty well, all things considered. I will say, if you don't like ELO, this is a very long movie.
Oh, yes. Well, it is. I do like ELO, so I was on board with that. And if you don't like Olivia Newton-John, you're not gonna like it either.
Right. I mean, it's only 90 minutes long, but that 90 minutes can really.
90 minutes is, the song "Magic," which was a huge hit.
Yeah.
For years, I've always misheard this lyric, which you have to believe in. We are magic. Mm-hmm. Don't let your aunt have a stray. And I'm just like, that's how I always say it. I finally Googled it for this, and I'm like, oh, that's not what she says at all.
What does she say? I always thought it was "Don't let your head go astray."
No, don't let your aim go astray.
How did I mishear that?
Yeah, so there you go. I'm not the only one, but don't let your aunt have a stray. It's like, who cares if she has a dog?
There's just some inherent cheesy cheapness to this, even in like those fades that.
Those fades were completely overdone the minute they used them.
With that rattlesnake sound effect. So we've got this painter who, played by Michael Beck, who is unsatisfied with his job as a commercial artist, redoing album covers. And in the beginning, he's trying to be a freelancer, and with his own original stuff, he becomes disillusioned, and he tears up his stuff, and he throws it out the window. And like Christina was saying, it touches the painting, and then the muses.
Welcome to be in the art world.
So we have 9 muses. They're all sisters, daughters of Zeus.
Yes.
So it's their job to inspire. So, of course, Olivia Newton-John is Kira, and she affixes herself to Michael Beck and becomes a mysterious figure in his life. And the other muses are kind of peopled around, so you see them every once in a while, like in the plot. I don't know if they're attending to other artists as this is going on, or what, or if they're all centered around this one guy.
Like when he takes the motorcycle, and
she's
like, sure.
Can I borrow this? Sure.
Yeah, he never brought it back.
Yeah, but that's because it's one of the muses.
It's because of muses.
Right. And then he comes across Gene Kelly, who, since he was a young man, has been lamenting the loss of his love, who was Kira, who was a muse for him in the 40s.
But she doesn't. But that's the thing there's a whole flashback sequence where he's dreaming she's in the USO outfit and they have this great little dance. But then later, she doesn't recognize him. She doesn't know who he is. And I'm
or
just
she
like,
pretends not to know.
is she supposed to?
And it seems like
I didn't think she was that smart that she was. Yeah, I didn't.
I don't know. It's
like,
that scene is the best scene in the movie. The scene where Gene Kelly and Olivia Newton-John,
where he dances with her ghost in the.
Yes, correct.
Yeah, that's actually the best scene. And then it's followed by like the extremely tedious roller skating scene played to suddenly, where they're inexplicably going through all these pop-up scenes, which are supposedly like,
because she said that this was a record. This is one of the things I wrote down. This was a recording studio, a special recording studio where artists go to get inspiration, and this inspiration is from like cardboard stand-ups of desert islands and stuff. Apparently,
I mean, I know what it's supposed to be. I just don't really get how that's inspiring.
How it's inspiring? Neither do I.
Didn't inspire me at all. Yeah.
And there's one scene where she's roller skating around the desert island like 5 times.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, we got to make this 90 minutes. Let's just keep rolling.
Let's go. One more time around. Let's go. But he never once, the first time he meets her, she like zooms away in a cartoon lightning bolt and he never questions it. He's just like, oh, okay. I guess we're friends then.
It's the whole thing. Like, there's nothing even remotely resembling connective tissue or like character development, or it's everything is just an excuse to have a musical scene, like a musical number. They go to buy clothes and then suddenly
it's like a montage.
That just took me right back to Ken's scene in Toy Story 3, where he's trying on all of his clothes for Barbie.
I mean, I have to say though, no matter what, he's in like a total crap movie. Gene Kelly is still Gene Kelly. Like he still smiles like a movie star. He still moves like a dancer. He's got that
presence. He's still got that presence.
He's still Gene Kelly, and you're just looking at him going like, why was he wasted on this? Well,
movie? I read that the only reason he said yes was because it was right down the road from his house.
Well, and in the documentary that I watched, that scene with him and Olivia Newton-John dancing was not in the original cut of the movie. And
that's because originally he said he wasn't going to dance.
Right, he said he wasn't going to dance. So when they test screened it, people were like, "But I wanted to see Gene Kelly dance."
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So the movie was done shooting, and he was out of his contract, and he said, "Okay, I'll come back if it's just me and Olivia, the DP, the camera operator, and Kenny Ortega, the choreographer."
So closed set.
Right.
Nobody
basically,
else.
Right, on a closed set, just the 5 of them, and then they shot that scene. And it is the best scene in the movie.
There is one line that I actually laughed out loud where she says, "I'm a muse." And then Michael Beck, "I'm glad somebody's having a good time."
Right. I find that amusing.
But then she says that she's been amused to Michelangelo, Shakespeare. I'm like, how does this guy fall in that lineage?
Right, somehow he's the next.
Right, like... After doing that, you came to inspire this guy to build a roller disco? Like
right. That was a pretty damn cool roller disco. Look at 2 tracks. I felt like I was in Solar Babies there for a minute.
The final scene in Xanadu, and it goes on and on. And this is like where I feel like the movie gets so inexplicable. It's like, why are there tightrope walkers?
He's changing costumes, Josie, and the music hats. Yeehaw.
But I do remember, again, like when I was a kid and I loved this movie because I was like, plot? What plot? I loved the scene when he like skates into the mural.
Oh, yes, he's trying to get into Xanadu, right.
You know what that reminded me of was Taylor in Beneath the Planet of the Apes when he goes
trying to get into
the fake cliff and he goes to hit it with his rifle and he falls in.
I think because, I was a kid who liked portal fantasies. I liked Alice in Wonderland, and I liked Chronicles of Narnia, especially The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, the idea of going into the wardrobe to another world. So I think I was just sort of attracted to the idea that you could go into the mural, and be in a different place.
Sonny Malone is Michael Beck's character. Of course, he falls in love with Kira. And
who wouldn't?
This can't happen because she is a muse. And she cuts him off every time he tries to get a little bit too romantic. Although making out seems to be okay. But anything past that...
Well, you got to do what you got to do to, inspire the guy.
But so when he goes through the painting, he is in the actual Xanadu. So he's there with Zeus. They will send her back for a moment or forever. And so they do. And this is the end of the movie where you have the big set piece where Gene Kelly is roller skating. And I don't know if they're actual paying customers, but it's the dancers that you've seen earlier. And they're the only people in this nightclub. So whether it's a success or not.
It closed the next day.
So Kira and the Muses perform at the club, and then she's gone. And he seems to be satisfied with this. He's sad, but then he goes to a diner, and then there you see the waitress, who is not indicating that she's Kira in any way, shape, or form. But I guess you're supposed to assume that she is, and that's how the movie.
So she came back forever.
Unless that's not Kira, and it's just a waitress.
Who looks like her.
That's already put too much thought into it. I'm just like, whatever.
So the reviews for this were not great.
Actually, my favorite review was it was a one sentence review. In a word, Xana don't.
Yeah. One of them was, where else can you see Olivia Newton-John as a roller skating light bulb with rags around her legs?
See, she was ahead of the curve on those leg warmers.
And I found an article from LA Weekly, which had come out around the time ELO got inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And Jeff Lynne was asked about the movie, and he said he's never seen it because the reviews were so bad, even though his music is in the whole movie.
He got a paycheck.
It came out, I mean, to a certain extent, like, it's such bad timing, right? Because I think even a year before, even though there's not much to this movie, it might have been successful. But, like, the previous summer, so the movie came out August 8th, 1980, and the previous summer, there was Disco Demolition Night at Comiskey Park, which is sort of the unofficial end of the disco era. And a lot of movies had been greenlit to come out around that time because they were still trying to take advantage of the disco craze. One of them was Can't Stop the Music, starring the Village People.
Village People, yeah.
To be fair, I don't think it would have been, even if it had been released.
You don't think so?
I don't think so. Because you had the Sgt. Pepper debacle. You know, that was starring the Bee Gees, and that went nowhere. And that was 78, I think.
Maybe people just didn't want to see disco. They wanted to hear disco.
They wanted to hear it.
They did. Well, no, I mean, I think part of it was everyone was like, oh, Saturday Night Fever, right? Like, that was it. So...
It was all downhill after that.
But it came out in August 8th, 1980, which, you know, it was considered a weak box office month then. It still is considered that now. The other movies that came out at the time were Raise the Titanic, The Fiendish Plot of Dr. Fu Manchu.
Yes.
And Smokey and the Bandit 2. And even though it was not up against very strong competition, Universal only put it in 200 theaters.
Wow.
So it didn't really even have a chance to reach its audience.
Definitely grown a cult.
It inspired the Golden Raspberries.
I know. Yeah. Actually, it was playing as a double feature with Can't Stop the Music for 99 cents.
Wow.
Some markets. That's money well spent right there.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned the Razzies because it inspired the creation of the Razzies, but Can't Stop the Music did, in fact, win Worst Picture.
Yes, yeah.
We should have done that.
Although I think it was Greenwald that won director at the Razzies.
Yeah.
So there was a Broadway version of this as well.
There was.
But apparently it was a satirical take on it. They actually kind of poked fun at it. It wasn't like a faithful recreation.
Yeah, and it ran for over a year. I have no memory of this.
You guys, speaking of Broadway and Broadway shows we've seen and roller skating, I actually saw Starlight Express.
Starlight Express. There you go.
Yeah.
I remember seeing commercials for that on like PIX and being like, that looks friggin' awesome. Like, that just looks amazing.
That was our 8th grade trip, to New York City, and we saw a Broadway show.
I saw Cats.
And we saw Starlight Express.
We saw Cats. Starlight Express, man. That's a blip in time.
Yes. And there were lasers and there was roller skating.
Wow. There was that Marvel Comics adaptation of Xanadu.
I can't imagine,
really?
How are you trying to make
that's like 4 pages.
Yeah.
Even like a 20-page comic.
It was one of those Marvel super specials where it was just a one-issue deal.
That's how I saw half my movies. So I read the comic adaptation before I ever saw.
Yeah. And as you said, Jones. Magic #1 in the U.S. and all over the world. Soundtrack, double platinum. That went number 4 in the U.S., so still a hit, musically at least. There's a little quote from the Coleridge poem about Kubla Khan. And as I'm reading it, I'm like, didn't Frankie Goes to Hollywood use this on their Welcome to the Pleasure Dome albums too? 20 million budget, and it made back 23 million box office, so not a hit, but it did make 3 million more than it cost.
I think again, like, it's sort of less about money and more about perception, right? Because there wasn't a single positive review, so
but that 23 million, as you know, was probably kids that had loved Grease, loved Olivia Newton-John, and that was enough to get enough people in the theater.
In the seats, and it was innocuous enough that your parents could probably leave you like, this looks like an innocent movie.
Yeah, though some of those parents might have stayed because they're like, oh, I love Gene Kelly,
No, probably half the dads are like, oh, I love Olivia Newton-John. I'm going to sit right here behind you, kids.
That was a real building that they used to make Xanadu, the Pan Pacific Auditorium, and it did have that Art Deco
it was nice
outside, but it was torn down about a decade after they made this movie.
So sad when those Art Deco buildings get torn down. We have a few still in Chicago that are preserved, and like to see that Art Deco interiors especially are so gorgeous. It's always such a disappointment when you find out a building like that's been torn down.
And I was surprised looking at that documentary that Santal Bergman is in this movie. Conan. I didn't recognize her in the movie, and I was like, what is she doing in this documentary? And then I realized
she's one of the muses. Yeah. Well, I mean, it's not like it's a part, per se.
No.
Like she comes dancing out of the mural, and then,
that's it.
You see her at the end.
Hey, thank you. Go home.
Yeah. Are we offering buckets for this? Is this bucket proof? This movie
is it bucket proof? I think it may be bucket proof. We afforded.
We
all
just
of our
accept it for what it is and move on.
Yeah, because I don't want to like throw shade at it. It is what it is. I enjoyed watching it just to say I finally watched it, and now I know what it is. And I'm sending my wife screen grabs. I'm like, guess what movie I'm watching? Because same thing. She had fond memories of it as a kid, probably watching it ad nauseum on HBO.
I mean, I don't dispute that this movie has very few redeeming qualities, like objectively few redeeming qualities. You know what I mean? I liked it when I was a kid.
Yeah.
That's all. And that's one of those things where it's like you can't separate some like formative experience from from the movie.
That's weekly for Jim.
Yeah,
but that's that we review movies on this show, and I'm sure sometimes people take umbrage with things that we say, and it's but I always talk about this, especially in terms, obviously, with my career, in terms of book reviews. People bring themselves to their experience. You bring yourself to the first time you experience something, you bring yourself when you experience it again, you're bringing a different self, when you go back to a movie, but you have a memory of whatever, the first time you saw it or the first time you read it. And like reviews are not like objective things. People think they are, but they're not. You're bringing your emotions and your experiences and your preferences, you're bringing all these other factors into how you feel about a movie. And like objectively I would say this movie is probably a 1, but because I loved it when I was a kid, it's like a 3, because there you go. Even though it's crap,
it's still crap. I liked.
Right. It's crap that I liked when I was like at the height of my Olivia Newton-John fandom.
And even the people that love this, I think, would concede that it is not a good movie.
It's not.
It's like cotton candy. It's going to sit on your hips, but damn, it tastes good when you eat it.
So with that, should we move on to our
we have to move on. Let's get out of Xanadu.
Confessionals.
We're going.
So we are continuing with the theme, with the musical theme, and we're not taking that great of a stretch this week. So since we covered 2 musicals, let's share with you all what our
we may never
musical
cover another musical again.
No, we will. We will.
Well, that's we did bring up Sweeney Todd, so
there's so much out there that we can.
That's true. It's amazing because like I said, you don't realize until I started like digging through. Favorite musical, and it's like any Disney movie is considered a musical. I didn't even factor those in because I think that they're just a given.
Yeah, in some movies, you have to kind of think to yourself, does this make the definition of a musical just because there's music in it?
Right.
Do the characters have to break into song at any given time? Can a concert film be considered a musical?
True.
So what's the criteria here that we're looking at? I think, it's your own criteria, really.
Right. I mean, I think probably if there's at least 50% of it is music, then it's a musical.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So did we have any strong feelings about this? Do we have an unequivocal, this is my favorite musical?
No, I got about 5 on here.
Yeah, I know. That's a thing.
Because again, you got some that as the kids. I mean, I'll jump on board here first, which is the Muppet Movie was probably one of the first soundtracks.
I had guessed that for you. I was going through my stuff like, what is Jeff going to choose?
First cassettes I ever owned, and long before I ever saw the movie, I had the cassette and I knew every one of those songs inside and out. I can sing them to you right now if you want me to. Kermit the Frog still makes me well up.
Even the Dr. Teeth song?
Oh, hell yeah.
Yeah.
So the Muppet Movie is pretty big. Chitty Chitty Bang Bang's another one. It's not full on musical, but there's a couple like weird musical numbers that show up in its 3-hour run. I don't even know if you would really consider it a musical, but like there's that Truly Scrumptious. There's a bunch. Chitty Chitty Bang Bang is the song itself, but I went with a little more obscure, which is a miniseries that came out in 2008, directed by Joss Whedon. Mm-hmm. Dr. Horrible sing-along blog. It was during the writer's strike, and so he with Neil Patrick Harris and Nathan Fillion. And it's just these little, mini episodes that span out. I think there's like 7 or 8 episodes. Absolutely love it, adore it.
I always love the end of that when he says, "I feel nothing." Yeah, and then
it's very heartbreaking.
Yeah.
It's heartbreaking because you're following this character who wants nothing more than to get into the evil guild of supervillains or whatever, and he has to kill somebody in order to make that happen.
You know that Buffy herself makes a little Easter egg appearance in there?
She's got a little Easter egg in there. Yeah, I mean, there's others, obviously Little Shop of Horrors. It's another one, but those are my top 3.
Hey, Jim, you go. This was your question.
2 of them I can say that we've already covered on the show. Talking about movies that we can concede are bad, but you love them anyway. Mm-hmm. The Jack and the Beanstalk anime, I think, has a ton of earworms. It's just I don't remember any of them.
I don't remember any of them, dude.
It's just such a bizarre siphoning of this very Japanese style into a Disney style musical. It is just unlike anything I've ever seen or experienced. So I'm going to say that the Raggedy Ann and Andy 1977 musical, again, very bizarre. And I have not entirely comfortable memories of it as a child. And that continues through as an adult. But again, the music is done by Joe Raposo, who did a lot of Sesame Street songs. So those are also very catchy and very memorable, housed in 2 very bizarre animated works. So there's those 2. And I'm going to have to say Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory.
Yeah, true.
Who can forget that? Pure imagination.
Yeah.
Brings a tear to my eye every time I hear that. Of course, and Wizard of Oz is right up there on my list.
Oh, yeah.
But
it's almost a given. There you go.
Closest to my heart musically, it was going to be no surprise to anybody, is David Bowie. Mm-hmm. And Todd Haynes made a movie in 1998 called Velvet Goldmine.
Mm-hmm.
And the soundtrack is unbelievable to anybody, and without using any David Bowie songs, because he didn't give him the rights to use his music. But so Todd Haynes had this movie about David Bowie that he had to morph into something else. And he did a great job. And the music is unbelievable. And that's the soundtrack probably I listen to most of any soundtrack that I own. It is an amazing work of art for anybody that loves Bowie or early 70s glam rock. So
Iggy
I'd say
Pop
Velvet
too.
Goldmine. Iggy Pop as well,
Yeah.
yes. Played by Ewan McGregor. Not as, technically not Iggy Pop, but...
It's clearly Iggy Pop.
I was going to say, no stretch of the imagination.
So that, I'm just waiting for the opportunity to spring that on you.
There you go.
It just hasn't come up yet, so...
Yeah, that's a great movie. That's a great movie. Christian Bale's in that movie too.
Yes, it's just a cavalcade of stars in that movie.
Yeah,
wow.
Really good film. So I actually had a hard time with this one only because my mom loves musicals. So when I was growing up, I think I watched I've seen like every Rodgers and Hammerstein film. You know, I've seen like every obscure musical. I think I've seen every musical that was ever made on film. I'm not joking. I tried really, really hard to narrow it down to 3. So I did, one of them is a Disney film. So like my number 3 is actually Bedknobs and Broomsticks.
Wow.
Yeah, something about Bedknobs and Broomsticks. Again, I think as a kid, I loved portal fantasies and the idea of, you know, like the magical bed that could take you places, you know, they go into another world with it. There's something about that really appealed to me when I was young, and I always liked the magical sort of singing sequences in the film. So that was one. Number 2 is Labyrinth.
Did you think I was going to say Labyrinth?
That's where I thought Jim was going. Yep.
That's why I was like, I'm going to wait and see if Jim says it first. Yeah, because again, sort of like came out like at I think the right time for me, you know. And I was always so desperate to see any kind of fantasy on film. And like many young women, I fell in love with David Bowie during the ballroom sequence.
Is that those fans? Is that as the world falls down?
Yeah. It's such a beautiful, beautifully choreographed sequence too. You know, it's like we all want to be Jennifer Connelly in the ball gown.
But a little disconcerting looking back on it.
Well, it is. Like as an adult, you're kind of like, well,
salacious.
He was 14 and he was, you know, whatever. And
come here, little girl.
He's always kind of like right on the edge of being inappropriate in that film.
Not gonna touch you. Not gonna touch you.
But I did love it. But finally, I had to. I'm a huge Stephen Sondheim fan. I don't think there's a Stephen Sondheim musical that I've ever disliked. And I mentioned it earlier, one of the first Sondheim film musicals that I remember seeing on stage was A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Forum. And I must choose Sweeney Todd as my number.
There you go.
Oh, okay.
It's Sweeney Todd, like, is such a... I've seen the stage show a couple of times, like different interpretations of the show. I do love Tim Burton's version of it because I love Tim Burton. You know, for a really long time, Johnny Depp was one of my favorite actors. It really leans into the horror elements. Like, obviously, I love the music. Talk about like an earworm, A Little Priest. I can sing A Little Priest anytime. Like, I could, like, if anyone even quotes one line from it, I'm like, yep,
that's it. You're off.
Like, I'm
you're
singing
off and
the
running.
whole thing. So I had a hard time, like, kind of trying to narrow this down.
Yeah.
Because I was like, you know, Sondheim also wrote the lyrics for West Side Story, and, you know, there's Into the Woods is unfilmed now, and I also love, sort of like honorable mention, I love Chicago. That's not a Sondheim, but it's just another musical that I love. I actually read the book about the real life murderesses who's inspired yeah. One thing you need to know about people from Chicago is, like, if anything comes out that Chicago is part of the story, we're like, yep, we want that. Like, we read all the non-fiction books, and any movie that's set in Chicago, we just hold it like close to our heart, you know.
That's a lot of music right there.
Yeah.
Yes. We're going to have a little bit more next week. Are we doing our summer series?
Yes,
I believe
and
we
you are
are
number
starting.
1.
All right.
Yes, I believe we are starting up a summer series.
I was thinking that I was going to be the first one. And the reason I say that there's going to be a little bit more music is that plays into one of my summer choices. Now, what we're going to do, this is a new series that we are embarking on for the next 3 weeks. So we're each taking a year, and we're looking at the summer releases of that year and picking 2 of our favorites. So I picked the year 1985. Jeff has got 84. Christina has 87. So we're starting with 85. But with my choices, I'm picking first Fright Night, which was inspired by our viewing of Rear Window, because those two have some DNA in common. and Real Genius with Val Kilmer, which has, and I've already said this, but one of the greatest closing credits songs ever. Yeah. So, and a great movie in its own right, Real Genius. And Fright Night we'll be talking about next week.
Very cool.
It's weird. When we did the Bad Movies episode and we wrote up the thing for the website, the Bad Movies We Love, and I picked Real Genius, Xanadu. And
it's all coming back.
And The Legend of Billie Jean. So
that is one of my sister's all-time favorite movies. Matter of fact, my sister loves Real Genius as well. So
and that Pat Benatar song from
That's right.
Legend of Billie Jean.
And when I wrote that, I said that for each one of those movies, the music played such a large role in my memory of the film. So we had to find some way to review Legend of Billie Jean.
Yeah.
And I'll have the triumvirate.
Wow. My head may explode.
So very excited.
I'm excited. I have not seen Fright Night in quite some time. That's the Evil Ernie, right? Was that the
Evil Ed?
Evil Ed. That was close.
I watched it last week.
What? Did you? Oh, you jumped the gun. You're like, I can't wait.
Are you going to watch it again, or was that your viewing for this show?
Yeah, no, I'll watch it again.
Okay.
Awesome. Very cool.
Thank you for listening as always.
Yes, thank you as always.
Thank you.
Hopefully you're humming a tune as you leave today.
Yeah, and any Hamilton fans who are listening for the first time, thanks for sticking around until the final moments here. You'll come back and listen to some more.
Yes, hopefully.
You'll be back.
And on that note, bye.
Bye, guys. Hello, everybody. If you liked the podcast you just heard, then please follow TMI on all of our social media outlets. First and foremost, email us at tmipodcast2018@gmail.com. That is tmipodcast2018@gmail.com.
And you can follow us on Twitter at TMI_podcast2018. Stop over, say hi, give us a compliment. We'd love to hear from you.
Awesome. Make sure you follow us on Instagram as well, which is also TMI_podcast2018.
And of course, we are on Facebook, facebook.com/TMI Podcast 2018. And it should be noted, we also have a community page, so join the forum.
And if you like to watch YouTube, you can see us at TMI Podcast 2018, all one word. Look for the popcorn bucket.
Popcorn bucket. Or you could just go to our website, which has every link there, TMIConfessionalspodcast.com. And we'll see you at the concession stand.
We'll save some popcorn for you.
What's wrong with this lady?